Hi everyone, welcome. My name's Schaefer and I'm an event strategist here at JDC Events. I'm speaking to you today live from the Petworth neighborhood of Washington, D.C. And all of us here at JDC are so happy to have you join us today and hope that you and yours are safe and well during this challenging time. We're thrilled to have you all with us for the second iteration of our digital debrief series. As a little bit of background, the way this series came about is, like many of you, we've been working from home for the last several weeks and spending a ton of time on Zoom meetings and participating in digital events. And we were starting to experience a little bit of webinar fatigue. So we designed the digital debrief series to be a compact 30-minute session brought to you every 2 to 3 weeks, and it'll cover a single aspect of planning digital events. Since your time is valuable, we want to keep that information tight and compact. And today we will be talking to you about some of the common questions we receive from clients pertaining to sponsorships and how to maximize your ROI, or return on investment, if this conversation is new to you. We're excited to engage with you, and I hope you find today's content valuable and practical when planning your digital event. Before we dig in and I introduce our panelists, I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping items quickly. First, this will be recorded and available on demand for viewing on our website a couple days after, jdc-events.com. You'll also all receive a follow-up email that'll have the link embedded there for you to view as well. Today's session is designed as an open discussion, so we really want to hear from you and engage with you. So at any time, please feel free to submit questions. You can do so via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you click that, you can submit those questions straight through to our panelists. And if we can't get to all of your questions today, which is hopefully the case, then we will follow up with all of you via email afterwards to continue the conversation offline. And at that point, we can also talk specifics pertaining to your individual events. Lastly, be sure to follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn, as well as other social platforms, for updates on future iterations of the Digital Debrief series and to keep up to date with all the happenings at JDC. So to kick things off, I am going to launch a live poll that will help frame today's discussion. You'll see a couple of questions pop up on your screen momentarily, and the answers to those we'll definitely cover today. So go ahead and submit those. So the first, just taking your temperature on how many of you are already offering sponsorships with your digital events. And if this is new to you, great. You should come away today with some helpful tips. I did want to let you know that since sponsorship is such a broad and expansive topic, we'll touch a little bit on trade shows today, but we will host a future webinar that digs in depth to cover trade shows and exhibitions. So it looks like a lot of you, 50-50 split almost. So I'm glad that this is going to be new and exciting. And ROI, yep, we get that challenge from a lot of our clients. So we'll definitely dig in. All right, so let me introduce you to today's panelists. First, I'm going to be joined by Kara Dow. Kara is JDC's Senior Director of Client Engagement and Operations. Hi, Kara.
Hi.
As an event industry veteran with over 30 years of experience working globally, Kara is a pro when it comes to crafting customized sponsorships for clients, including a standout $2 million sponsorship program for a large tech industry association event. Kara's philosophy for designing sponsorships is see a need, fill a need. Welcome, Kara.
Thank you.
Also joining us is Dana Rice, JDC's exhibitions specialist. With 20 years of experience managing events, Dana has overseen the exhibitor base and sponsorships for numerous global exhibitions. She's an adept customer service-oriented professional who values content development and attendee engagement when conceiving sponsorships for digital and live events. Dana loves the strategy behind monetization, and she's here today sharing some of her tips and enthusiasm for creating eye-catching sponsorships your attendees will love. Hi, ladies. Happy to have you.
Thank you.
Let's dig right in. Kara, to kick things off, can you talk to us how, if at all, sponsorships differ between live and digital events?
Sure. Well, there isn't a whole lot of difference between sponsorships in live in-person events and the digital world. There needs to be a focus on activations and content. Of course, you want to have branding. Branding is a good offering for a lot of companies, but you really want to focus on what the interested parties want and how to offer that. You want to connect your service and product providers with decision makers in your given industry. And you want to focus on inside the digital world, what is it that makes it meaningful and what creates those connections. So it's really about those connections, those shared experiences that you should be focusing on when you're planning your digital events.
And I know a lot of us sitting at home, we're kind of missing that shared experience, not being able to attend and plan live events right now, hopefully in the near future when it becomes an appropriate and safe time. But I think today we'll talk through a lot of, how can we create those serendipitous moments still in a digital world?
Absolutely.
So Dana, throwing it over to you, what are the benefits of sponsorship for digital events? Why, as planners, should we want to include those?
Actually, there are quite a few benefits to digital sponsorships. Probably the largest one is that you're able to reach a much larger audience. Your exposure is beyond just the event. Digital sponsorships can be run like mini marketing campaigns. They can be run both pre, post, and during the event. These sponsorships can provide year-round recognition to the exhibitor sponsors beyond just the event itself.
So you're extending that shelf life of the sponsorship because you're getting that engagement pre, during, and post, which we can do with live events, but it sounds like there's a longevity that isn't
Yes, the brand exposure is limitless, really,
right,
because you're talking about the World Wide Web, and it's limitless in who can be reached, and it provides the exposure for the brands that the sponsors are looking for. And in some cases, it can even net the companies new revenue because the digital events reach a different audience. The sponsorship campaigns can look any way you want them to digitally. They can be as simple as logo placement or pop-ups, or they can be as complex as sponsor-led sessions and speaking engagements. Champagne toasts, where attendees can be sent champagne glasses and a cup of champagne before the event, and we can all toast together. So the digital sponsorships are very far-reaching.
They're very scalable.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. I'd love to hear, Kara, how do you go about designing sponsorships for a digital event? What's included in the package? Are there tiers? How do you grab the attention of prospects? Anything from branding to activations?
Well, I think we have to start at stage one, and that's looking at our sponsors as more than just our money source. We need to be looking at them from a partnering standpoint, where we're giving them more than branding opportunities, which are fine. Branding opportunities are very good. As I mentioned before, a lot of companies want to be in your event and position themselves. And so branding is important. But most of the time, your sponsors are going to want something that's truly meaningful, where they're seen as thought leaders in your industry and content contributors. In that way, you want to offer them thought leadership forums, where they're having a chance to speak, lead different kinds of focus groups, and provide activations. Design sponsorships that really connect what your attendees want with what your service providers can give. And that's where you've made the right connection. So that brings me into another component in the sponsorship planning process. And what's super important is to think about, what do your attendees want? What is it they're looking for? Make sure that you know what their needs are, and then you're looking to fill it. So it goes back to my saying.
See a need, fill a need.
That's correct. And you want your activations to really speak to that and bring those sponsors to the table to fill that need.
And, you said activation a few times, and that's a very, I would say, a buzzword right now in the digital world. I mean, we talk about them for live events, but can you give us a concrete example of what an activation would look like for a digital event?
Yes, I can. And I can use an example from the event that you mentioned earlier in the opening, which was for the tech industry. So in the tech industry, for that particular event, there's a category of individuals who are the original equipment manufacturers, and they tend to be the exhibitors. And then there's the attendees that are the end users. Well, bringing them together and bridging that gap is the channel. And the channel didn't have an opportunity to be able to be connected to those two audiences. So they were interested in the OEMs as well as the end users.
So you wanted to bring them to the table to be part of that.
Correct.
Going back to that thought leadership.
Correct. And in a meaningful way, so that the OEMs had an opportunity to be distributed more, and the end users had the opportunity for price points through the value-added distributors and value-added resellers. So bringing them together in a meaningful way, we created something called the channel connection. And in this way, they were able to attend the channel connection space, and they could log in, they could get consultancy, systems integration information, and really get connected with the OEMs that they wanted to be connected to. So they got, the channel got the opportunity for the sponsorship. We were able to monetize that, but we also met the need of two other markets in our event by connecting the OEMs with the end users through the channel.
Great. So you were filling that gap and then bringing parties that otherwise weren't being asked, they weren't included in the conversation. Right. You know, what are you looking for? And I think anytime we've seen that with our clients at JDC, the longevity of the sponsorship, they want to be involved then for future years, whether it's an annual event or a quarterly event. You know, when you're giving them a seat at the table and showing that you really care, that goes a long way. It might seem obvious, but I think when it becomes the digital space, we have to be very thoughtful and aware of that.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that you're able to give them that instant return on investment because they're able to make those meaningful connections that they're trying to make. And so it's something that they can have tangible in the moment. And I think that's important to pay recognition to, especially in digital events, because it is so instantaneous.
That's great. I see one participant question coming through, and this person asked, how do we measure ROI for sponsors, that return on investment? How do we do that for a digital event? Dana, can you talk through those?
Absolutely. So with digital events, it's a little different than live events. The return on investment is very clear. You can see very clearly what the net profit to the net cost of the investment is with the use of data analytics. Data analytics actually can provide a clear answer to what the investment is reaping in as far as finances go and what the actual return on investment is.
And when we're talking about data analytics, we mean the quantitative data to back up why this is meaningful to a sponsor. Can you give us an example of what that would be?
Absolutely. So for instance, in the real world, there might be a sponsorship where the sponsor sponsors lanyards, and every attendee that attends the trade show or the event receives a lanyard with the sponsor's logo on it.
Right.
However, in the digital world, it might be something where retargeting campaigns are used. For instance, we have sponsorships that are available to take place in an e-commerce type setting. Mm-hmm. So what happens is with the retargeting campaign, you're able to actually see the sale, the finished sale. So it can be as simple as, like, if you have a shoe company that's sponsoring an event, their shoes can pop up and be purchased at the actual digital event. And so how that works is if someone's gone in and viewed those shoes, later on, they might be on Facebook, LinkedIn, and they might see that shoe pop up again. And those advertisements follow you throughout the day, kind of like how we all see those all day long when we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or on our social media pages.
But then you would actually see how many folks have clicked through the sponsor's banner ad, and then that's resulted in a purchase, or perhaps an engagement, asking for a one-on-one conversation, a thought leadership forum or something else.
That's
And it
correct.
can show rest time as well.
Great point. A couple of participant questions rolling in that are related. Is there ever a time you may not want sponsors for your digital event? And opposite that, can you have too many sponsors? And I'd also like to note, someone had mentioned that, medical associations have limits to what they can offer as sponsors. So can you also frame that in a way of talking through, there might be some events that sponsorships are appropriate, are not appropriate, or have limitations?
So with government events, it's not likely that you'll be able to have sponsorships.
Yeah, you probably have to check with the specific department or bureau and run through those protocols.
Right, because it's a part of the contracting procedure as well. So it's the protocols and the contracting. So I would just answer the first part of your question in that way. To answer the second part of the question, which is sort of twofold, there is an opportunity to have a ton or limitless sponsorships on digital events, where you just don't have that opportunity in the in-person events. So
mainly because in person, the physical real estate of your venue or your convention center, you're confined to a certain number of rooms and square footage.
Correct. So to that, I would say you do need to think about that a little bit in the digital world, meaning there is digital fatigue. We are doing this digital debrief series purposely under 30 minutes.
Because we're spending more time than ever in front of our screens.
Right. So we need to think about the same thing in terms of what we're offering for our sponsorships. We don't want to inundate our visitors with, pop-up ads.
Sensory overload, like bing, bang, banners flying through.
Exactly. Having said that, obviously the smaller the event, if it's one day, then you want to limit it and make it tighter. If it's 3-day, you have more opportunity. Inside of that, it's very scalable. So I think the best thing is to think about what's the size of your program and then start with what's the most meaningful. What can you do in terms of sponsorship opportunity that's going to have the greatest impact? I used the channel connection as an example earlier, but the reason why I use that is because it had such great impact.
Right, and you want the content of the event to be reflective of that.
Correct. So whether it's a thought leader forum, a series of focus groups, or if it's specifically creating a unique opportunity like the channel connection, you want to start out with the things that are the most meaningful. Inside of that, going back to restrictions and things from the medical industry, I understand that when it comes to pharmaceuticals, pharmaceutical companies will want to sponsor an event. But they can't put specific drugs, is my understanding, in front of particular audiences because there might be end users of that product, so to say. I would say to that, you want to be just very careful when you're working with the sponsors that you understand how you should be using those sponsorship labels. So for example, if it is a large pharmaceutical company, using the pharmaceutical company's name, but not the actual drug that's used in the care and keeping of people in that industry.
Got it. Okay. So, we really need to go back to the beginning, as you said earlier, of looking at who are those attendees, what are they looking to get out of the event, define those objectives, make sure the content is then reflective of that, and then have the conversations with our sponsors about what they can bring to the table because it's a cohesive group that everything needs to be interwoven.
Absolutely.
What about pricing for digital sponsorships? You're talking about scalability in terms of offering a few, one-off smaller sponsorships, perhaps a couple of larger headline sponsorships that really involve a lot of attendee engagement. And I know, especially now, folks have limited budgets. Organizations might not have as much to spend anymore. Dana, can you talk to us about pricing? And Kara, feel free to share your thoughts as well.
Sure. The prices that you command in live events will hold up in the digital events as well. As long as you're producing compelling content, you're able to charge the same price that you would at a live event for a digital event. content is king in this situation.
I think that's important that we underscore that, because I know our clients ask us a lot, and prospects especially, you know, am I going to have to reduce my costs? And so you're saying, no, you don't necessarily need to do that as long as the content is still there, the engagement opportunities are present.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would say to that, you really have to scale that pricing structure. You have to have you have to understand there are companies that are going to come to the table that they have a smaller contribution to make financially, but they're still green, and you know there's still opportunity that you can build in there. However big or small, it's still a sponsorship opportunity that can have meaning and can provide you revenue. So you don't want to walk away from that, and you can capture every dollar. Think about low cost solutions like pop-up ads. Maybe there's only 2 throughout the day that they get for a small contribution amount. However, that's an opportunity for you to monetize your event, give them ROI, and provide some information that goes to your attendees. So there is plenty that you can do. You just have to remember it has to be scalable.
What about, I know Dana, you and I talk about this a lot, you know, swag bags or other fun sponsorships that are geared more towards engagement, you know, networking receptions. Can you talk to our audience about, you know, what does that translate to on your screen? If you're inviting folks to network, you know, what does that room look like? You know, I think for some of us, it's hard to think through, well, how am I replicating a reception online?
Well, with that being said, you can skin it to look any way you want it to. It can look like you're in a reception hall and that you have networking tables that are set up just like you would if you walked into a live, you know, event in a reception hall. You can have it set with table cards that are preset so that you're encouraging engagement among those groups at those tables. And then those tables can break off into separate sessions. You can do it like a timed networking, like a quick dating type thing where people are able to engage and jump from table to table to engage with the next group, or someone sees what conversation is taking place at that table and they want to be part of it and can switch from table to table to jump from conversation to conversation. It can look like a poolside chat. It can look
creative with that event design. I mean,
yeah, it can look like a beer garden,
like live music, or a comedian, or an artist, you know, painting live. I mean, dependent upon who your audience is. So there are opportunities to make it fun and interactive.
Absolutely. And you know, I've seen clients create a beer garden as their scale, as their skin, and they've sent everybody beers in advance to have a happy hour take place in a beer garden. It was kind of a novel idea, but it made the event fun and allowed for those networking opportunities to just take place and be kind of casual.
Maybe we should be sending toilet paper and Clorox supplies right now, and not alcohol.
That might be fun.
Sales are up on that too, so jury's out. Well, that's really helpful. What about, you know, across the board, best practices, helpful tips for sponsorship design?
Absolutely. Yep, I can help with that. I always say go the easiest route. Pull your registrants in the beginning to determine what key takeaways and experiences they want. Once you've received that, it's so much easier to match the sponsorship opportunity with the solution provider for that. So a good example for that is you might be having an event where you've polled your registrants, and your registrants have said that networking is key, that they need opportunity, even if it's serendipitous. They don't necessarily want it predetermined or pre-organized like roundtable discussions. They just want serendipity to happen. So if you're looking to create that kind of accidental networking and you've polled them and they've asked that, why not get a sponsor, a solution provider, to facilitate an open chat room? And in that open chat room, they can greet someone, say, hey, thanks for being here. It's great conversations taking place. Schaefer and Dana are over there at, you know, room number 1, and they're talking about XYZ, and so and so and so and so are over here, and they're talking about PDQ. And then the person has been directed to the conversations that they want to have, or they can just hop around between the different rooms. But you've given the opportunity for your sponsor to facilitate that conversation. And then that's somebody that they can go back to when they're, bouncing around the different chats and having conversation. That's somebody they can go back to as a reliable source to direct them the content they want to receive.
And opposite, I mean, you were giving an example of more serendipitous engagement, but we've seen clients also when they've been pulling registrants or taking information, whether it's demographics based on their title or location or their industry, what their business goals are, and then using that and providing to a sponsor, okay, here are the top 20 individuals we think you should invite to an invitation only session. And, getting those folks in front of the sponsor so that they feel like they're really reaching their key audience.
Yeah, it can look like accidental network, but it can all be planned out with the data analytics
behind the scenes.
Yeah.
There's the strategy.
There's a little bit of puppeting behind the scenes.
Well, that's terrific. It looks like we have time for one more question. Again, we've seen this a lot at JDC. When a sponsor's new, they'll be really active in the event at first, but then sometimes drop off. How do we build a lasting relationship with sponsors so that we can keep them around for future events?
Dana?
Absolutely. Sure. One of the ways is to provide the data analytics to the sponsors so that they can see a direct view of what their ROI looks like. That's important for them to see that their investment is paying off. The other way is to actually ask the sponsors what they want. Sometimes having them help in the design process is very important. And sometimes you're able to provide custom solutions or custom sponsorships based on what they see their needs to be. And it's important to bring together the sponsors and the attendees' needs, and really in that equation, ROI is inherent.
That's great. Thank you both so much. Any final closing thoughts from either of you?
I would just say that I'd like to drive home how important it is that we treat our sponsors with the respect that they deserve. They're not just a money source for us. They're also a source for great content and thought leadership. And that's super important when we're doing the planning of our sponsorship opportunities.
And sponsors as being seen as partners is very important, because if they're vested in your event, the ROI will follow.
Great. Well, I appreciate it so much, ladies. Thank you so much for your insight and your tips.
Pleasure.
Before we conclude, we do have one more live poll for all of you in the audience. You should see that pop up. As I mentioned earlier, every 2 to 3 weeks, JDC will release a new module designed around one aspect of planning for digital events. So your responses here will help frame those future topics. So we appreciate you taking the time to respond to that. And following up on this, in a few days, you will receive an email that'll have, again, a link to the webinar. I know there were several questions that we did not get to today, questions and comments. So in addition to following up with each of you via email, my colleagues and I will sit down and have a separate conversation, which will be recorded. And then that will be disseminated out as well as posted on the website. So that way, if you see another question that's of interest to you, you will get that information too. So thank you again. Your time is really precious, and we appreciate you spending it with all of us. So we hope to see you here and in person again soon. Be well and take good care.